Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. We're so happy to be providing this Friday afternoon webinar on how to reframe elder abuse when we're using social media. And I think very important nowadays, with most of our work being virtual, that this comes at a perfect time. So just a few items for today around communication. So of course, all attendees are muted during the course of the webinar. And we will be recording this webinar, and it will be available on our website within about 72 hours of this conclusion of the webinar. And today we're happy to have an ASL interpreter with us, and she will be with us throughout the duration of the webinar. And for those of you that need to adjust the size of your screen, you'll see a tab in between the presentation and the gallery view of the speakers, and you can drag the line either way to make the presentation larger or the screen size larger of the videos. And of course, if you have any questions or want answers on, we encourage you to put that in the Q&A box on the webinar, and leave the chat box for general chit chat. My colleague Christine Chen will be monitoring the Q&A. And if you have any technical difficulties, please put them in the chat box, and Christine will try to sort them out for you. And at the end of the webinar, you're going to see an evaluation pop up, and we encourage you to complete the evaluation so we know what sort of webinars you expect coming into the new year. So now I invite my colleague Christine Chen to provide a territory acknowledgement today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario endeavours to honour this land and its treaties by strengthening our relationship and responsibilities to them. We live and work on Métis, Anishinaabe, Ojibwe and Cree territories, and we know that the presence of settlers is not neutral. It has had and continues to have devastating impacts on many aspects of life for Indigenous peoples. Many of our practices, including the way we care for elders, the way we educate, the way we create community, came to these lands through the ongoing process of colonialism. We hold a new understanding in our interactions and engagements with this land and its people. There is important work being done by many nations and allies to ensure the continued thriving of these communities and knowledge systems. Those of us who are settlers, myself included, we recognize that our knowledge and the way of doing things may not be the priority as we work towards a safe Ontario for all seniors.
Thank you so much, Christine. So just an outline of what we will be speaking on this afternoon's webinar is we'll be going over some opening remarks, and we're going to be looking at how we can restructure our communities to put elder abuse in the public agenda. We're also going to learn this afternoon about best practices when communicating with the public around issues on elder abuse. And then we're leaving a good 15 to 20 minutes for questions and answers. So a little bit about us as an agency. We do envision an Ontario where all seniors are free from abuse and have a strong voice and feel safe and respected. We do that through actions such as what we're doing today, public forum webinars, raising awareness, delivering education and training, and of course, collaborating with partners, our international partners here today. So without further ado, we're so excited for this afternoon. So let me introduce Ali and Alicia. Ali received her Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology from the University of California, Berkeley. She has over 5 years experience supporting public service organizations in communications, event coordination, and internal operations. She currently is the national coordinator for the National Center on Elder Abuse, a national elder abuse resource center, which is funded by the US Administration on Aging. And we're also excited to have Alicia. She currently serves as the outreach coordinator at the National Center on Elder Abuse. At NCACEA, she works to forge new meaningful connections between local and national communities, elder justice, and aging professionals and other stakeholders. Welcome, ladies. We're so excited to have you. So I've just stopped my share and you ladies can go ahead and have the floor.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Laura. So I'm going to start my share now. Let's see if this works.
The joys of
Technology,
yes.
Get it?
Wonderful. I will stop my video and again, we're so excited to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Can I get a verbal confirmation that my screen is sharing?
Yes,
Now
it
it's
is.
sharing.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, as Laura said, I am Alyssa or Allie. That's my nickname that everyone calls me, and I coordinate the Reframing Elder Abuse project that we're all going to talk about today. Reframing Elder Abuse is all about how we talk about the topic of elder abuse with the public. So that's why today's webinar is called How to Talk About Elder Abuse. But specifically, we're going to talk about reframing on social media, and Alicia is going to take you through that later. Before we get started, let's take care of some housekeeping items.
Right, thank you, Allie. So before we get started, just a couple quick reminders. You'll be automatically muted once you enter the webinar, like Laura mentioned. We'll try to keep the training interactive through some polls, and we'll be sending materials and the slides after the webinar if you want to refer back to them at a later time. At the end of the training, we will be providing a survey for you to have the opportunity to give us some feedback so we could continue to grow this webinar.
Great. So let's get started with objectives. Alicia and I find that a lot of our audiences like to know what they're in for before we start the presentation. First things first, we're going to talk about what is the Reframing Elder Abuse Project and what spurred the Reframing Elder Abuse Project. The second objective of today is we're going to review the research that is utilized in the Reframing Elder Abuse Project. And the third task of the day is we're going to show you some examples and give you practical tips so that you can apply the recommendations in your everyday practices, especially on social media communications, the topic of today's webinar. So you're going to learn how to plan and organize your posts about elder abuse prevention. So let's go ahead and get started with first poll of the day. Remember, we said this is going to be an interactive webinar. So there's no checking your emails during this webinar.
Okay, so the first poll of the day is we want to get to know who's in the room. So please let us know which sector you are from.
Awesome. So it looks like we can see the results here. We've got a really great group in here. Many people from social services, but also some folks from legal services, academia, advocacy, and a large group from other as well. So we've got a diverse group. We like to start off with this poll because we like to see who's in the room, because I know we're in this virtual atmosphere, but it allows us to get to know you a little better. Great. So now we can move on to our next slide and close this poll. So what is the Reframing Elder Abuse Project? Well, like any good organizational project, as I'm sure many of you know as professionals in the field, a lot of good projects start off with a problem. So we at the National Center on Elder Abuse, as a national resource center that provides all of this information on the topic of elder abuse in the United States, we had all of these communications materials, such as flyers, websites, and social media posts, where we would advertise about the topic of elder abuse in the hopes that it would engage folks and get them to want to get involved in our issue and solving the issue of elder abuse. However, we realized we had a communications problem. We had no idea if those communications were actually working. We didn't know if it was getting folks to understand the underlying contributions to the topic of elder abuse in the United States. We didn't know if it was getting them to understand the broad consequences of elder abuse or any of the solutions, and making people want to engage to help us solve elder abuse and prevent and address it. So from there, when we realized we had that communications problem, we learned about this organization called the Frameworks Institute. So the Frameworks Institute is an organization that conducts communications research so that you can figure out if you're talking about your social issue in the most productive way with the public. We worked with the Frameworks Institute to, number one, understand how the public currently perceives elder abuse. So when you say the word elder, or the two words, I should say, elder abuse in society today, what comes to mind? So the Frameworks Institute, they went out to the malls of America and they actually figured it out for us. The second thing that Frameworks Institute helped us do is they used that research on public conceptions of elder abuse to devise a new communication strategy on the topic so that we can avoid some unproductive understandings that exist in the public's conceptions around elder abuse and advance the ideas, the productive ones, the productive ideas regarding elder abuse in our communications with the public. And I like to provide a disclaimer here that when I'm talking about the public, I'm talking about lay people who are not professionals like you or I. So these are folks who may not even have heard of elder abuse. So this communication strategy really works well with people who aren't professionals. Thirdly, the last step from the Reframing Elder Abuse Project is to disseminate that new communication strategy on elder abuse. And that's what we're doing today. Alicia and I are going to go over this new communication strategy with you all in the hopes that you're going to use it in your everyday practices. And I will say that the research is based on research in the United States. So really practice your own discretion on whether or not all of these strategies apply to you. So next, we're going to go over what our long-term goal is for this project.
Thank you, Allie. So the long-term goal of the Reframing Elder Abuse Project is to build a society that makes informed choices on policies and practices that address elder abuse based on valid and reliable information. So Allie mentioned how the Frameworks Institute did research to see how the public conceptualizes elder abuse. We are going to present their findings using the swamp of elder abuse. The swamp of elder abuse uses the metaphor of a swamp to synthesize these research findings. In a swamp, there are good things and bad things. There could be rocks, sticks in the mud, or alligators that can halt you, but there's also useful ecology such as lily pads. What goes on in people's minds when they think about elder abuse works similarly. There are good things and bad things. There are productive thoughts or cultural models like lily pads that you can leap your messaging off of, or there are unproductive understandings or cultural models on elder abuse like alligators, rocks, or sticks in the mud that can either eat your message or halt it entirely. Now let's have Allie introduce some unproductive understandings that exist among the public right now that make it harder for our elder abuse public awareness messaging to get through.
Excellent introduction, Alicia. So I don't get the fun part of the swamp. I get kind of the bad parts, but I like to start off with the bad parts. So we kind of rip it off with a Band-Aid here, and Alicia's going to get to do the much lighter good things about the swamp of elder abuse, the lily pads. But the first unproductive cultural model, or stick in the mud or rock, that we like to compare this to is first that elder abuse is understood just like it sounds. The public tends to just equate it to, okay, older person and abuse. And then they know what elder abuse is, but there's specific types of elder abuse that are harder for them to understand. Specifically, sexual abuse was very hard for them to register among older adults. Also, elder neglect as well, especially self-neglect. So what's interesting about the swamp of elder abuse is we can actually use these understandings to help us in our communications, right? So we know that sexual abuse and neglect are very hard for them to understand. So these are the specific types of elder abuse we need to spend more time on in our public communications materials. Also, it could give us a hint, maybe we shouldn't start off with these two types of elder abuse first. Maybe we should use the other types of abuse that are easier for them to understand to ease them into the topic. So this provides a very helpful tip for us. The second unproductive cultural model, kind of stick in the mud concept, was that the public mainly sees older adults as deteriorating individuals, unfortunately. They see older adults as entirely dependent, which means that they are inherently vulnerable. This is an unproductive cultural model that exists within our society. And you'll notice here that it kind of overlaps with the sexual abuse one, because a lot of people only saw older adults as deteriorating individuals. That is kind of what made it hard for them to understand sexual abuse. They couldn't imagine an older adult being sexually attractive or being sexually active at all. So this cultural model really overlaps with the other one too. One of the ways that we can avoid portraying this cultural model so much in our communications materials is by not always portraying older adults as dependent individuals in our communications materials, in our social media posts, in pictures, and in our texts. Second item from this specific cultural model of deterioration, paternalism. When the Frameworks Institute did their research, a lot of times people compared older adults to children, unfortunately, and referred to them really as objects of care rather than agents of their own lives. And this is a problem because it denied the agency of older adults and made it seem like older adults couldn't be a part of the solution, when that is absolutely false. They can. And so portraying the wide spectrum of ages, abilities, and capacities within older adults in our communications materials can help combat this cultural model. And then thirdly is a cultural model that we like to call modern life as is the problem. So at first, this may seem like a somewhat good cultural model because it points to perhaps an outside cultural force that contributes to the issue of elder abuse, a systemic force, the issues of modern life, right? However, the Frameworks Institute found that this actually was an unproductive cultural model because how could we ever change something so powerful and nebulous as modern life? Specifically, when it came to modern life, the particular issues of modern life that they found problematic was nursing homes. They saw them as an unfortunate necessity. They also had this false sense that nursing homes couldn't provide the same level of care that a family could. And they also just saw a cultural devaluation of older people in our society. So this was a really problematic cultural model because how could we ever change something so impactful and nebulous as modern life. So it overall contributed to this sense of fatalism. Kind of similar to the deterioration model too. If older adults are inherently vulnerable, how could we ever solve the issue of elder abuse? And then lastly, there was a spotlight on individuals that exists in the public's mind when they think about elder abuse and elder abuse situations. And what this means is when they heard about a case of elder abuse, they tended to over-focus on the individuals involved rather than seeing the broad sweeping impacts that the issue has on our society. They focused on the victim-perpetrator relationship. So they would get very caught up in condemning the perpetrator, saying that they were greedy, lazy, lacking more character, sickos, or they would get very caught up in blaming the victim, unfortunately, saying that perhaps this was payback for an earlier situation of child abuse that took place, or saying that older people were just difficult and challenging to work with. And this spotlight on individuals really kept them from seeing any of the broader consequences or solutions to elder abuse. So now we get to go to the kind of lighter, more hopeful lily pads from this swamp of elder abuse.
Yeah, I get to go over the lighter part, which is very exciting. So there were some productive understandings from the swamp as well. There are lily pads that can help us as communicators. The first lily pad was the agreement that elder abuse is unacceptable. The public understands that elder abuse is not right. This is productive. We can use this elder abuse is wrong notion when explaining the issue. The second productive understanding or lily pad was the public did express they think that caregivers are pushed to the limit. This illustrates some understanding of outside pressures or missing or weak support for caregivers as contributing to elder abuse. We could use this understanding to explain elder abuse and then go into other contributors as well, such as lack of research, social isolation, lack of awareness, or training. Allie will help us to further understand productive and unproductive understandings of the swamp.
Great. So now I kind of can get to the heart of the swamp, right? Which is really our bottom line as communicators on elder abuse is what comes to mind when the public thinks about solutions. And I've kind of hinted to it already. So you might expect some of these, but there were, just like any part of the swamp cultural models, there were good things and there were bad things about what exists when the public thinks about solutions to elder abuse. Some good things, some lily pads that we can leap our messages off of. The public did believe that awareness and education could help us address elder abuse. The bad thing about awareness and education is a lot of the awareness and education that they expressed that they wanted more education on was surveillance and prosecution. Unfortunately, a lot of surveillance and prosecution are more after the fact type of solutions, but we want to make sure that we're highlighting both intervention solutions and prevention solutions. So if we're going to spread awareness and education on elder abuse, we need to make sure we're not just talking about some of the solutions to elder abuse, but really have a broad lens when it comes to talking about solutions, not just on after the fact type of solutions. Second thing that was really good was the public did recognize that support for caregivers was needed. So this is a really good example of a solution that we can kind of start off of in our messaging and then talk about other solutions afterwards, because the support for caregivers, the public understands that and can easily be like, yes, you're absolutely right. And then it creates a primer for talking about other solutions too. But overall, there was only 2 lily pads in this. And unfortunately, a lot of the unproductive cultural models, such as the spotlight on individuals, modern life or modern life as a problem or the deterioration cultural model really interfered with our messaging on solutions. And so ultimately, the Frameworks Institute found that the public really didn't think that much could be done to help us prevent and address elder abuse in today's society. So this is something that this is exactly the opposite of what we want. So this is why we want to reframe our communication so that we can get these solutions out there. And unfortunately, this type of cultural model a lot of these cultural models, such as the vulnerability aspect and the spotlight on individuals, are very prevalent on social media. So today, Alicia is going to give some tips on how to avoid that type of communications. And now we're going to go on to our next poll.
Right, so now that we've learned about the swamp of elder abuse and swampy things in communication, we want to learn a little bit more about the cultural models from the swamp that your organization sees most on social media. So we can do a little bit of what you see on your own posts that maybe you're thinking back about now, or what you've seen on other posts in general.
Excellent. So if you're ready, we can check out the results. Interesting. So it seems like most are seeing that vulnerability cultural model, deterioration cultural model. Oh, and 35% said all of the above is very prevalent. Wow. Okay. This is great. This is really interesting. And we're glad to see that these are issues that you've come across as well. This is exactly what the NCEA was seeing. And this is why we did our work with the Frameworks Institute. Great. Thank you all so much.
All right, well, let's jump back in. So after the Frameworks Institute did their research on what's in the swamp of elder abuse, we worked with them to use these understandings to determine what to avoid and what to advance in our communications. From there, we came up with the structure of justice narrative. This is a new way to talk about elder abuse that uses a value and metaphor to avoid barriers in the swamp and enhance public understanding of the cause, consequences, and solutions to elder abuse. The first step in the structure of justice narrative is to talk about why this issue matters. Why does elder abuse matter? To start, we use a common value, justice. This value is tested by the Frameworks Institute and helps us to promote collective responsibility and boost support for our issue among the public. So you can start with this first step by saying something like, a just society works to make sure everyone is free from the threat of abuse at every stage of life. Another example could be something along the lines of, in order to live up to our ideal of justice for all, we need to work to address the issue of elder abuse. So now I'll hand it off to Ali to review step 2 in the structure of justice narrative.
Thank you, Alicia. So after using the value of justice to really get people invested in talking about the issue of elder abuse, our second step is to talk about how this issue works. What is it about, and why isn't what we're doing now working? So there's kind of three steps to this particular step number 2. And in some ways, I think it's the most challenging part of the structure of justice narrative. So I'm going to explain it the best I can with these images that we use in our public service announcement. So the first step in talking about what this issue is about is we need to utilize an example, and then using an example will help to explain the contributing factors to elder abuse. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh goodness, wouldn't this call out the spotlight on individuals cultural model, because we're focusing on an individual case, and now someone's going to be thinking about either the victim or the perpetrator, as I said before. But the Framework Institute said there's nothing wrong with using examples. What's wrong is the way that we are phrasing it or framing it. In order to utilize an example well, we need to make sure that when we're using the example, the main character of the story is not the victim or the perpetrator. The main characters of the story are the actual systemic contribution that can cause conditions to be ripe for elder abuse in our society. Here's an example of George. We like to use his example a lot. So George, age 77, he now lives alone since his wife died a few years ago, and his daughter lives too far away to visit him regularly. His neighborhood also lacks reliable public transit and many age-friendly civic spaces, such as perhaps a library or a senior center. With fewer social interactions, it means fewer opportunities for walking, talking, or laughing. With a lot of these normal, healthy experiences he misses, his physical, cognitive, and emotional health have gotten worse, and his daughter doesn't know what she can do or where she can turn to for help. Without a structure of support, it's easy to see how George could encounter an unsafe situation, such as elder maltreatment, and how this situation could go unnoticed. So you'll notice in my example, I did not over talk about George and his vulnerability. I did not mention anything about vulnerability, and I didn't overemphasize him as a victim. But the main player in this story was the fact that he is socially isolated, and his environment is not accommodating to help prevent social isolation. So we can see how this situation can contribute to a risk factor to elder abuse. The second step within talking about what this issue is about is we can utilize a metaphor of a structure. The Framework Institute found that using metaphor communicate specifically because you can imagine a structure. You can visualize it in your mind. So for us, we could say something. We could say some.
Hi, Laura, you're muted.
Hi, it seems as though we've run into some technical issues. We've lost Ali. So what I'm going to do is, Alicia, are you able to share your screen with the presentation?
Absolutely. Let me go ahead and pull that up.
Wonderful. Everyone just bear with us, and this is a great opportunity to think of some hard-hitting questions that you want answered at the end of this webinar today. We thank everyone for their patience.
Looks like technology is trying to take an early break for the weekend, huh?
I think so. And we thought it was going to be me living in the country, not you guys in California. Alicia, if you're okay with it, I do have the slide deck up and ready now. I can go ahead and share my screen.
I just pulled it up. Let me go
Okay.
ahead and get started here.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Let's see. All right, share screen. And were we about here when we lost Ali?
Yes, you're bang on.
Great.
Great test to see how engaged all of us were. I think the polls are really helping, and I'll let you take it away. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so very much. So just to pick up where Ali was saying, so the explanation and the metaphor here is to explain where George is losing support in his community rather than focusing from the swamp on the family member alone and individualism. We're going to focus and broaden the view on the community and the structure as a whole. So here we can see that George has one pillar and is missing out on additional support to keep his life full and supported. All right. So with policies and programs in this metaphor, we can see that George has a full support of beams to make sure that he has every aspect of his life supported and to prevent elder abuse. So now we're expanding to systemic issues that could be contributing and any lack of resources within the community that George would be missing in his day-to-day life to prevent elder abuse. And these are some gifts that we use, and we will be sharing these later on to really illustrate the structures of support and these beams that we're talking about in our justice narrative to support George. So we see here some community centers and educational programs to prevent isolation and specifically hone in on that topic and contributing topics, in addition to public transportation, which is a big support structure for everything, including public isolation and healthcare and access to relevant resources within the community. So now we'd like to dive into some of our examples and some restructuring that we had to do at home to reframe some of our most popular resources. So this is our before image of our Red Flags of Abuse resource. So our Red Flags of Abuse resource used to be our most popular resource, but as you can see, there were some issues with reframing in this piece. Whoops. You can see a couple of items here, like vulnerable elder adult and focusing in on the caregiver has control. The caregiver has control, so we're focusing in on that individualism and using, again, words like older adult and unable to comprehend. So giving the idea that the older adult is unable to have independence or empowerment in these flyers. Another thing I wanted to pull back on was the images of the older adults in these photos. So you could see nobody's looking at the camera. The images are dark, which causes the reader to believe that the person in these images and older adults lack agency and empowerment in their decisions and ability to engage in preventing elder abuse as well. So this is our updated, reframed version of this piece. You can see that there are no images of older adults lacking agency or just anything that would lead us to have negative immediate biases against our older adults in our communities. We've also removed language such as vulnerable or victim. So you could see here that it's brief and very straightforward regarding the message that we're trying to get across. So we're gonna pull in a little to see exactly where we made these decisions, where we made these changes compared to before. So the before flyer showed language such as unable to take part in finances. Here, we're showing the exact signs: unpaid bills, fraudulent signatures, unusual changes. So we're pulling away from that individualism. Another item that we do over at the NCEA are technical assistance and information referrals. And this is a before text of that information. So seniors are a vulnerable audience, often preyed upon by unlicensed or unscrupulous people. Here you can see always underline vulnerable because that's automatically putting older adults down. And preyed upon, making them seem like they're lacking agency. And of course, the underlined portion of unscrupulous people goes back into that paternalism and highlights the sickos that Ali was talking about earlier. In the after portion, you can see the adjustments that we've made. We honed in on that justice narrative and saying, in a just society, everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of age. So you can really see the transformation in this piece here to reframe at home.
Thank you, Alicia. Can you go
Thank
back?
you so much. Absolutely. Let's
Sure.
go ahead and, do you want to transfer back, Ali?
Yes, just go back to that last slide. I'm back, everyone. Sorry about that. We've been having we have been having power outages in San Diego, California, due to some fires, and I wonder if that's part of the reason that I was kind of cutting in and out. Sorry about that, but just did a great job, Alicia, in explaining this one. I just wanted to reiterate that I think this is an awesome example to show because it's so simple and short, but it doesn't, if you noticed as a reader, you don't see all three steps that I was able to talk about before I cut out, of course, but you don't see all three steps. We just utilize justice, and we brought in the lens and we talk about everyone deserves justice, right? So not just talking about you deserve justice, but everyone deserves justice. So I like to show this example because it shows an example where you don't have to utilize all three steps. Every scenario is going to be different, especially for your social media communications that are very, they need to be very short and snippy, right? Or snappy, I mean. So Alicia, we'll go ahead and get started with that. But thanks, Alicia, for filling in. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share and then transfer it back over to you, Allie.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, everybody.
It looks like Elisa might be frozen. No? Oh no, you're back.
No.
Great.
There I am.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. All right, Alicia's going to get
Thank
started.
you so much. Can't hold us back, technical difficulties.
All right, go ahead, Alicia.
Oh, thank you so much. Back on track. So, why should we reframe in social media communications? First, and perhaps the easiest way to start reframing the way we talk about elder abuse is to start with our own communication materials. Reframing starts with us and how we communicate our target issue. So utilizing this strategy will help to avoid swampy sticks in the mud and having readable communications for potential partners and the lay public. So let's see where we have the opportunity to broaden the lens and create a collective approach in communicating the issue of elder abuse. So we can start at home with an example of a post from the NCEA a few years ago. So immediately you could see some of the issues that we already reviewed today. The photo is in black and white of a person looking away from the camera, lacking agency. There's also some individualism in the post, in the wording of the post, highlighting the sickos and focusing on attributes of the perpetrator and victim and largely failing to emphasize how structures and systems shape context. So we're missing that structure of narrative piece here as well. It also highlights a crisis without solutions, that nothing can be done. We can also see here that there's not a hashtag to follow up on the issue, which is important, especially on Facebook, to have a strong caption to engage audiences, because Facebook analytics actually show that 10% of users are clicking on the articles posted, which means a large part of the audiences are taking most of their information from this post alone, or your post alone, rather. A hashtag will also increase the likelihood that the user will read more with additional posts. So on the transform version of this piece, we can see a reframed, empowering photo, and it approaches elder abuse as a collective and social issue. In addition, a clear, concise solution is presented. Notice and report, they say. There's also a hashtag to engage readers to join in to either read more or contribute additional posts. So, what should we do if we want to repost an article and the image seems great, but the wording isn't reframed like this example here? In this case, just do a repost with your own reframe language. So here you can see that we've reposted this great article, but we've added some inclusive language to it to encourage everyone to participate in public life. So we're not just honing in on one individual item. Okay. So another important form got a little bit of a freeze here. All right, another important form of communications on social media is creating or joining in on relevant campaigns. A really big one that everyone enjoys joining in on is World Elder Awareness, World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, WEAD. This year we reframed our post for virtual WEAD and increased post amounts to pick up a little bit of the awareness activities that we normally would have been practicing in person. In addition, we created some reframed materials that we can mail out to continue to increase access to all members of the community, including coloring posters, which you can see on the upper right-hand side, placemats, stickers, and the bookmarks that you can see here. So up next, we have an example of, oh, we lost her again. All right, I'll bring mine back up. Oh, there you are, Ellie.
It might be better if we share your screen,
Okay.
unfortunately, with my internet.
All right. So this is our We Add Twitter chat this year, and the Twitter chats are really great opportunities to take to broaden your questions and introduce reframing into your chats and communications and increase that retweet and seeing regularly this broadened reframe version. So you can see here we've especially this year changed wording such as physical distancing rather than social distancing. We use wording like survivors of elder abuse, making sure that we get rid of that victim individualism language. And you could see on question 6, we engage people in supporting older adults in the communities, really taking in that structure of justice narrative and empowering members of our community to engage in elder abuse prevention. Okay, so engaging other professionals and organizations is a must. Really engaging others in our communications on social media is a great way to spread awareness about reframing and also to get a little more activity. So make sure that you regularly like and follow and tag your fellow partners and potential partners on social media, tagging on other events so you can get that communication and broaden your audience as well. And try to post regularly so that you can stay relevant and up to date on upcoming events or awareness months so that you are always within the trend and taking the time to reframe your pieces. Google Alerts are a great way to stay up to date on recent research and upcoming events and any updated articles to really make sure that your messaging, while reframed and you're spreading awareness of your piece, is also up to date on what's going on and what's current in the events. So some great Google Alert topics can be age discrimination, aging in place, um, elder abuse, these types of items. And I mean, these are just examples. You can have, there's a large range of alerts that you can set just typing in some ideas. Maximizing reach is also very important. You want to be brief and engaging, but also be able to use graphics and hashtags to keep your audiences engaged and you're not just posting the same thing over and over. And you want to make sure that you're also able to join in on some events as well so that you're able to broaden that audience. So joining in with new partners, maybe some campaigns and Twitter chats as well. We also use automatic messaging for social customer service. So if you set an automatic message, you'll be able to get back to somebody very quickly and make them feel heard and acknowledged before you're actually able to respond to the message in a thorough way and provide whatever resources the technical assistance request is asking for. Planning posts is a big item to be able to schedule your posts around what is going on, maybe the calendar of events hold on to a calendar of events that provides you with some organization of what's going on that month. Is it domestic violence or interpartner violence month? Is WEAD coming up? Is it National Retirement Security Day? So keeping up with those events, but also being able to stay relevant and keep up to post in an appropriate way. So usually we recommend a couple posts a day on social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram versus LinkedIn, maybe once a week because the traffic is a little lower on those sites. And I'll go into that a little more into detail in a second here. And then being able to take the time to reframe your post. If you're posting so frequently, it's difficult to make sure and to take the time to reframe your piece and make sure that you're not taking any of these swampy pieces with you into your social media communications. So try to use the scheduling posts so that you can take the time maybe the day before or maybe on a Monday to schedule out your posts for the week and make sure that they're all reframed so that when you're reposting or doing things that you would have to do in the moment, you have plenty of time. You don't have to worry about what you're posting for that day for your social media account. Twitter, we try to do 5 tweets or retweets a day during a work day to stay relevant. And we use Twitter and LinkedIn as our professional sites. So we want to make sure that we're spreading awareness about reframing on Twitter and LinkedIn so that we're reaching the appropriate audiences versus Facebook and Instagram. We're speaking more to the lay public on these social media outlets. So here we would do more of applying our reframed messaging. So using the reframed posts rather than spreading awareness about, say, webinars or upcoming toolkits from the reframing projects. Instagram is a great source or a great place to target younger audiences for intergenerational posts as well. So for Instagram, it's great for our younger audiences because they haven't really been exposed so much to the swampy communication skills. So it's great to get a fresh start or an early start with these folks in implementing this new style of communication. This is our STEEP initiative outreach calendar. And this is a little bit what I was talking about earlier, having access to an outreach calendar to keep organized with what the upcoming events are. And we try to update this calendar every year. In fact, our 2021 calendar, we just added 20 new events and awareness activities. So it's really great to make sure that you're up to date with these calendars so you can stay relevant in your posts and weaving in those awareness messaging. And our STEEP outreach initiative as well, we have a toolkit where you're able to put in your own logo. You have access to a brochure, policy templates, etc. And I'll be sure to provide you the QR code to that resource in a few here. All right, so I'll hand it over to Allie to review our quick start guide.
Excellent. Let's hope that, oh, okay, excellent. Let's hope my internet works still. Thanks everyone for your patience with me. So this is our quick start guide to talking about elder abuse, and it just has real quick the do's and don'ts regarding reframing the issue of elder abuse. We find it extremely helpful at the NCEA. Many of us have already taken the initiative to print this out and tape it to our desktop too, because it's that useful. First thing, just kind of summarizing what we went over is appeal to justice instead of appealing to sympathy through those vulnerable images or those victim perpetrator stories so much. Talk about the importance of social connections instead. of talking about vulnerable populations, and also demonstrate the collective solutions instead of focusing so much on crisis-laden or emotional rhetoric. Explain the underlying social conditions that increase risk factors instead of focusing on the individual perpetrators or victims. Also, use that social structure metaphor to help you. And instead of using the data and expert jargon to explain the causes and consequences of elder abuse. So the Frameworks Institute, it is very interesting, and prior research has found that statistics a lot of times has the opposite effect that we think it does. A lot of times the public doesn't understand statistics or can get very overwhelmed with statistics to the point where they become fatalistic about the issue. If this issue is so big throughout these numbers, how could we ever solve the issue, right? So be very careful about your use of statistics within communication materials. Might be useful for researchers, but for the public, sometimes not so much. If you're going to use statistics, don't let it just stand alone. Explain, pair it with solutions here. Which gets to our last tip from the Quick Start Guide. Provide solutions that emphasize collective responsibility and systemic policy changes. And instead of providing solutions that just emphasize the individual responsibility, not about what they can do, talk about what we can all do to help prevent and address elder abuse. So next I'm going to get started talking about some practical tips. First one, I just mentioned, use pronouns like we, us, all, and everyone in your communications materials. Try to avoid referring to older adults as other. Older adults are not an other population. We are all aging. So emphasize that. Preventing and addressing elder abuse is significant. It's important to all of us. Why? Because we are all aging. Avoid those triggering images or using the word like vulnerable. As Alicia showed you in the red flags of elder abuse, that is what we were not doing. In the red flags of elder abuse, we actually labeled an older adult as vulnerable within the signs of elder abuse, which is not the most productive place to put it, because what should be the focus of that material? The signs of elder abuse, not the vulnerability of older adults. Next tip, use person first language. And we find this very helpful at the NCA so that we can avoid portraying older adults always as victims. So we instead will use terms like a person who experienced elder abuse instead of using the term victim, just so that we avoid any labels to older adults. And highlight multiple solutions. In that red flags of elder abuse, we highlighted the red flags, and once we took out all the vulnerability images and all the vulnerability text, we realized we had so much more space left to talk about what we wanted to talk about, which was other solutions too. So we not only did we talk about the red flags, but later on we talked about more solutions to elder abuse besides talking about red flags, which is intergenerational centers, perhaps funding more research, getting involved in your community to talk about aging issues during public planning meetings, for instance. So we were able to talk about that a lot more. So don't just highlight one solution. There's a lot of different solutions out there. And Alicia already showed you some social media tips. Make sure to practice those, practice applying those on your social media channels. And now we can move on to the next slide.
Thank you, Allie. So we just want to close out by sharing some resources that we've touched on today and that might be helpful as you move forward with your reframing communications. So a great resource is the Talking Elder Abuse Toolkit on the Frameworks website, and you could access these resources through the QR code here on the left-hand side. And this toolkit gives you access to additional elder abuse resources like flashcards and videos and additional research as well. They also offer on this website a free online course, and this has just been offered if you use the code WEAD2020. So I definitely recommend taking advantage of that resource. There's also our sister project called the Reframing Aging Initiative, which goes hand in hand with a little bit of what we discussed today and focuses on aging specifically. If you want some more tips about reframing, or you want to stay up to date with reminders about upcoming webinars or upcoming research advice, especially during these ever-changing times, I'd recommend following up with some monthly tips. We try not to blow up your email too much, so just once a month. I also wanted to review some of the NCEA resources. Ali briefly went over the GIF version of our PSA video with our buddy George. If you want to see the entire video, it's really great, and it's a great way to get your communications started and to utilize in your own with your own target audiences regarding elder abuse and the importance of that structure of justice. We also have here the updated red flags of abuse fact sheet and facts about elder abuse fact sheet, and then a final fact sheet, 12 things to know about elder abuse. Those are really great to have in your back pocket, whether you want to review them yourself or disseminate them throughout your own audiences. This last resource here is our STEEP toolkit. This is the toolkit I was talking with you about earlier, which has those updated outreach calendars of events, has some social media policies and some social media recommended posts that you could just go ahead and that are meant for you to go ahead and cut and copy straight off of the toolkit. So it's really helpful to kind of get you going, especially if you're feeling a little uninspired sometimes with a new post. All right, that brings us into our third poll. So our last question here is, what can you do to promote this reframe strategy to the public after what we've talked about today? Yes, all of the above. That's great. So we went over quite a few different options on how to reframe in general, and then transfer that into your social media communications across platforms today. Very exciting.
Excellent. You all were paying attention.
Yes.
Awesome.
So thank you very much, everyone, for being wonderful participants. We've been enjoying your comments in the chat box and your questions in the Q&A box. Elisa and Alicia, wonderful job. Thank you so much for helping us rethink elder abuse. So some very good comments from Catherine about, using the term elder abuse. She noticed in a media story last night that they were talking about exploitation of older adults in Nova Scotia, and the word elder abuse was not used. Somebody else said, nobody wants to be the poster child for elder abuse. And they talked about how the media is sensationalizes and talks about these horrid things appearing in our society. And David Tate was made the comment that, people seem to be more sympathetic to animal abuse or child abuse than elder abuse. Can I invite your reflections on what these people have said?
Yes, absolutely. I was reading, the good thing about my internet cutting out and me having to come back and not share my screen is that I was able to read some of those, and I really enjoyed the comments. It really motivated me and got me to understand that you all were paying attention. Those are great questions. So the first question, I believe, was about using the term elder abuse. I've actually received this question before, and the term elder abuse, the Frameworks Institute didn't find any major problems with the term elder abuse. However, I will say that saying elder and then abuse tends to focus on older adults as other, right? So I would say if you would like to avoid using the term elder abuse or just minimizing it a little bit, talk about abuse as we age. That's something that we utilize a lot. So it broadens the lens, like to make sure that you're not just talking about, this is just an issue that older adults need to worry about. This is actually an issue we all need to take seriously and help to prevent and address elder abuse. So that would be my tip for how to minimize usage of the term. Unfortunately, at the NCA, we're kind of stuck with our name. It's, you know, federally funded grant. It's part of our name, but we have talked about this topic much within the NCA. And we do agree that the term is getting more and more outdated. So I hear you there. And one of the tips is talking about abuse as we age, always broadening that lens out and not talking about older adults just as other. There was some really great comments about the media and sensationalism. This is something that I hear a lot when I talk about reframing. And that the media really capitalizes on the sensationalism, grabbing their attention. However, we know that we don't want to just grab their attention. We want them to understand the issue, not just grab their attention. So this is a constant tension between reframing and the media. And my best advice for this is, if ever you have someone contacts you as a professional with the media after perhaps an egregious case, if you're going to talk about a particular case with a reporter, broaden that lens out. So go ahead and talk about that case, but talk about the underlying conditions that may have contributed to that issue. Just like in the structure of justice narrative, you need to explain what else contributed to it, not just focus on the egregiousness itself or the victim and the perpetrator so much, but talk about what were the forces behind why this elder abuse occurred. And then again, broaden the lens out and say, he's not the only one. He or she is not the only one. This happens how many times a year? How many people? How many of us are aging? Everyone. So this is important for us all. So when you're talking to a reporter, make sure to answer it in that reframed way, where you're not just talking just about this particular case. At the end of your conversation with the reporter, broaden that lens out. This person is not the only one. This is how big the issue is. This is why it matters. So that's a really great tip. And David, I think it was David Tate had really great comments on that. And about elder abuse not being taken as seriously as child abuse and animal abuse. It's interesting to hear that during this webinar, because that's an issue we have in the United States as well. We hope that by using this reframe strategy, that people will start to take this more seriously, because they will see that we are all aging. So part of the reason why we're reframing is to help put elder abuse on that same map with the other issues. I will say that the Frameworks Institute did talk about comparing abuse types. People get a little lost in comparing abuse types because they kind of think, well, why are you comparing? You know, they're all they're all like necessary, important. So try and avoid comparing types of like, oh, it needs to be taken seriously, just like child abuse and animal abuse. I would avoid doing that because now you've got their mind thinking about other types of abuse, but really your topic is elder abuse specifically. So that's my long-winded answer, but hopefully it was helpful. What else? What other questions?
We have quite
there?
Thank you, Elisa. That was great. We've got quite a number of questions. So I wanted to just share that Jill is a daily money manager in Canada, and she said that, you know, elders are quite resistant to the term abuse, and they prefer, maybe they're more comfortable with the term mistreatment. And Yvonne was reflecting on, you know, what could be a word to use if we didn't use elder abuse. And some others were saying, you know, you mentioned justice as the value, but, you know, Michelle was lamenting that no one wishes to address justice issues in general because it will take such a huge job to scrutinize the reasons behind injustice overall. And there are already so many human rights violations, even in Canada. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's why when we use the justice narrative, we focus on our specific issue. So it helps people narrow down that issue of injustice. So I think that helps us resolve that issue, because I think, yeah, I think she's absolutely right. And I think justice is a term that kind of gets tossed around a lot, but I think the fact that we specify our issue afterward and directly relate it really helps to mitigate that issue. Can you repeat the second question? I just want to make sure I answer everyone.
Like, justice is such a huge value, and it's such a, you know, if we're going to fight, we're going to reframe elder abuse as an injustice phenomenon, then, you know, it's such a huge thing. And, you know, what another participant was saying, you know, we would need group action. And, you know, where do we start? Carla was asking, how do we start on the legal issues? You know, it seems like we need group action, and justice is just so big.
Yeah. That's a really great question. And I think it relates to someone else's about law enforcement as well, about like not taking the issue of elder abuse seriously with law enforcement. At the end, for us, for our reasoning for this project, we're just talking about the way we communicate so that we can promote understanding and promote those solutions. As far as taking the systemic actions, that's something that's going to be on everyone, right? So this is just the first step. The first step is getting people to actually understand the issues behind it, allowing them to make more informed decisions could help them later on. And this reframing communications is basically, we want to eventually change culture, right? And changing culture doesn't happen overnight. I wish it did. Unfortunately, it doesn't. But the Frameworks Institute has said that this could take up to 10 years to try and get these ideas actually embedded in our society, and then get them to make those informed decisions so that they can make decisions to fund research, to talk about how we are all aging, to avoid these negative stereotypes about older adults. So I will say that this is just the first step. And as far as other solutions out there, especially in regards to the question about law enforcement, we actually have a tool for law enforcement for elder abuse specifically called EAGLE. And so that project actually is a collection checklist so that they could easily understand their state statutes in the United States. Also, they can easily collect evidence and mark it down on the checklist, and that helps with prosecution later on. And that I saw that question and I thought, oh, this is a perfect chance for me to share that resource. So I will definitely link everyone to that resource. I think it would be very helpful.
We have a question, some questions about social media itself and writing. I know that looking at the participant list, we have a lot of creative types and writers in the group. So David Tate was saying, you know, he blogs. He's an attorney in the US. He blogs regularly, and you know, he needs to what he was saying is, would you please recommend journalists and other outlets and ways to get the stories and news out so that people will read it? He says, I blog regularly and I certainly can discuss elder abuse more often, but I also need readership to see what I write. And then somebody else has written here that, Valerie is asking, as we learn to reframe, is it helpful to repost from reliable sources? And what would they be? Are there templates to customize for local use?
Mm-hmm. So Alicia, I'll answer the first. Alicia, I'll answer the first part, and then can you answer the second part about social media specifically?
Absolutely.
Thanks, Alicia. David Tate's comment about getting more readership. Unfortunately, I don't have direct names of journalists for you, David, but I will say that when I talked about like talking to reporters, the tips that I included in that answer would be really helpful for you as well. If there's a big case out there that's in the news, I recommend capitalizing on it and writing a blog post as soon as possible, because that's the time when you're going to get the most interest on your blog posts. That said, just like I said in the previous example, when you talk about you can talk about the case at first. Make sure to talk about the underlying conditions that reinforce that situation of elder abuse, then broaden the lens out. This is not just the only case that exists in our society. It happens, this many times. Broaden the lens and explain that, then explain solutions to the issue. So that's my tip for David on increasing readership, but doing it in a reframed way. And then Alicia, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even add on to both of those questions to say, to remind everyone to follow each other and to follow those hashtags, reframing elder abuse, or any campaigns regarding reframing elder abuse, because once you get that retweet or you like somebody else's post and they send you back a like and reply, you start to broaden your audience to the audience that your potential partners have built as well. In regards to actually creating reframed posts, it can be a little difficult to get started, which is where I would redirect you to our Steep toolkit that I talked about earlier, and you could use that QR code or that link there, or look that up if you don't want to wait for us to send out the slides yet. And with that toolkit, there's pre-crafted posts for Facebook and Twitter. So, Facebook are a little bit longer and Twitter's a little shorter, to get you started on, to inspire you on to create some upcoming posts and to really get the ball going, so that once you start to get a hang of it, it'll just come very naturally. But in the days you feel uninspired, those are already ready for you. And then we also try to make a Steep WeAd toolkit. So when WeAd comes around, you'll have some ideas of some reframed posts to start to share.
Thank you so much. So Amina Begum is asking, is there any resource available online that we can follow to reframe our communication? I know you've mentioned some of the tools already, but I wanted to ask her question. And then Michelle was saying, could we delineate through public survey, what are the actual places of power specifically over older people?
I think that's a great question. I'm not the researcher, but I think that would be a really great idea for some research. So I think she's got a great grant idea there. And then as far as reframing resources, absolutely. Alicia, do you mind going back to our resources slide? Great. So the Talking Elder Abuse Toolkit is an amazing resource, and that's actually made by the Frameworks Institute. When they first came up with the strategy, they made some cool tools for us. And it'll say on the top of the toolkit, it says, you can even use this verbatim if they want to. Those tools are for you all to use. So they've got social media post ideas. There's also a really helpful frequently asked questions guide. So if you have common questions about elder abuse, like what is elder abuse that you get from the public, if that's a question you get a lot, they have an answer written out for you, an example answer, which is really helpful. And then I think the monthly tips e-newsletter is extremely helpful too. That's actually tips that Alicia and I write after all of our experience in reframing. Whenever we do technical assistance, like if I'm working on an NCA resource or someone sends something to me where I'm helping to reframe it, I learn things along the way. That's how I created that slide about like tips about using we, us, everyone, or using person first language. So I share those kind of tips monthly in the e-newsletter, and they're very short. 1 sentence tips that you can receive once a month. So I think that would be a very helpful, and it keeps reframing on your mind throughout the year and not just after this webinar.
I want to read out a comment from Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario's Executive Director, Marta. Marta Hayek is saying that, you know, we at Elder Abuse, we work with Indigenous populations, and the word elder has a very different connotation. So we're very mindful of that, and we work with community elders to find culturally sensitive ways to partner with them rather than talking at them. I want to ask a little question here. Deborah McCarthy has asked, do you receive funding for frameworks research?
We didn't receive the direct funding for the research. Frameworks themselves received that funding, came from private funders such as the Archstone Foundation here in California, grant makers in aging, and the John A. Hartford Foundation. So they funded that research, and the National Center, as a very wide-reaching resource for both professionals and the public, we are in charge of dissemination. So the research is done, and now it's really in the NCA's hand to make sure that you all utilize some of these strategies.
I hear you say so much that, you know, we are all aging, and certainly at Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario, we talk to seniors every day, and they tell us, you know, we're still growing, we're all still maturing. And somebody's asked a really great question, and let this be the last question because we have time is moving on. Heidi has said, what do you think about the age-friendly movement in reframing? What do you think about the age-friendly movement?
Absolutely. I'm a huge advocate for age-friendly communities. Our resources, our environments are not built for us as we age, unfortunately. And so I think that we should be advocating for a lot of universal design. And I could actually go on about this because I'm an urban planner, an urban planning student right now. So I'm really big on accessibility and the environment, which is partly why I try and talk about it in these presentations, but talking about public transportation, because it's just not realistic to always have society built for cars when we may not be able to always drive. Also having benches as well as respite when we're walking throughout our communities, curb cuts for people who may need an extra curb cut for a wheelchair, walking and rolling, etc. And but I will say we do run the risk of getting it really falling into a little bit of a pigeonhole here by just talking about it as an age-friendly community. The fact of the matter is that age-friendly communities benefit everyone, not just older adults. So you can see a little bit of my urban planner messaging coming out here, but not only do people with wheelchairs or walkers use those curb cuts, but also families with strollers use those curb cuts that are super useful. Also people delivering mail, people carrying luggage. So if we're going to talk about age-friendly communities, make sure to be talking about how it benefits everyone, not just older adults. So that's why it's important to build age-friendly communities, reduce social isolation, and help us reduce other health problems like elder abuse as well.
Thank you so much, Ali. This has been a wonderful presentation. I truly am so gracious for both of your knowledge and skill set. I do want to touch on before we end this webinar that we were getting some comments around EAPO, our agency, and how we plan on re-examining and reframing our current resource guides and communication. So as communication lead, I can say that we are more than committed to begin to reframe and look at how we're communicating and what resources we're providing Ontarians. And with key international partners like the National Center on Elder Abuse, you will continue to be a key partner, and we will definitely rely on you for reframing in 2021. I would be more than happy to have you ladies back in the new year, and hopefully we can start talking about WEAD, because that will be the first conversation come January. So again, thank you so much. And for all of the attendees today, the full recording of the webinar, all the glitches with Ali will also be recorded. And of course, presentations and resources will be on our website within 72 hours. So thanks again to all. Be safe, healthy, and happy, and have a great weekend. Take care.
Thank you.